After striking out with Curzon in episode 8, Pennyworth and Sykes head to a bar because Alfred has questions, mainly being, how is Sykes alive and how did she know about Curzon? Sykes won't tell him how she's alive and just says, I have important friends when it comes to the Curzon question. Pennyworth fills Sykes in as to why Curzon was the one to kill Esme, and then she fills him in on the fact that he wasn't working alone. There was a woman. She tells him that she was there to see Esme when she saw this couple walk in, and she wasn't able to get a proper look at them because they let themselves in so quickly. That seems to give Pennyworth some sort of clue as to who that might have been, so he gets up to leave, and Sykes wants to come with, but he's adamant no. She even goes so far as to say, if you loved Esme as much as I did, you'll know that I need to be there. You'll know how much this means to me. So he reluctantly walks to the realtor office with her. And the two of them interrogate this poor real estate agent. The guy nervously explains that, yeah, he gave over the keys, but they do it all the time because there's other apartments in the building. Pennyworth questions why then, when he heard about Esme's murder, did he not call the police? But he says, I called the police immediately. I gave the police all of the information they would need. And the fact that the police knew really sets Pennyworth off. Him and Sykes starts walking down the street, and Sykes asks, what are we going to do now? And he says, I'll tell you what we do. We never see each other again. And then he hops on a train and he leaves. He heads straight to the bar where half the bar is watching a soccer game while this guy from the Raven Society shows up and tries to rile up support because the Raven Society is having a big gathering in the park and they're trying to get the word out. Alfie, though, really doesn't care about the Raven Society or the football match. He cares about finding Dave Boy and Baza. He finds them in a corner booth and lets them know that the night of the murder, Curzon had a woman with him. And the description sounded like that cleaning lady from Curzon's house. So he wants Dave Boy and Baza to go find her. Reason he can't help, he has other business to attend to, i.e., the fact that Esme's murder was covered up. So as soon as he's done at the bar, he heads to Detective Aziz's office. Pennyworth shows up and confronts Aziz over the fact the police covered up Esme's murder even though they knew who killed her. Aziz congratulates Pennyworth on being able to crack the case, but Aziz goes on to explain that Curzon is the bastard son of a very important man, a lord that he's not willing to give Pennyworth the name of. He'd actually rather die than give Pennyworth the name. Pennyworth demands to know where Curzon is, but Aziz swears that he doesn't know where Curzon is. But if he gives him a few days, he probably could find out. So Alfred gives him 24 hours and then he leaves. Now, while Pennyworth is trying to track down answers to Esme's murder, the rest of the country is focused on this rally for the Raven Society. It's gotten so big that the Prime Minister and the Queen are talking about it. Prime Minister goes on to say that there will be a crowd screaming for blood, or they'll be screaming for a general election at the least. Either way, it leads to the same thing, which is a hung parliament, martial law, blood, and anarchy. The Queen thinks that he's being a little overdramatic, but Prime Minister assures her, no, I'm not. That's what it'll lead to, anarchy. The whole country will be watching to see how we respond. Prime Minister goes on to explain that the Raven Society is willing to destroy half the country to get what they want. And the Queen points out, yeah, but it'll be under royal authority, correct? And the Prime Minister says, yeah, but you'd have to follow their orders. I'd like to point out the Duke of Windermere would be very happy to take your place, but she reminds him that they're never supposed to speak his name again. He's the Queen's disgraced uncle who had to flee the country. The Prime Minister asked the Queen's permission to use the harshest available methods at this rally. So we're talking rubber bullets, water cannons, 1 or 2 snipers. But the Queen feels like that would make her look pretty oppressive, so she just wants to send in horses. And even though the Prime Minister thinks it's a terrible idea, he doesn't really have a choice. The news of the rally has also reached Undine Thwaite and John Ripper. And Undine Thwaite can't figure out why exactly Gaunt is holding a rally after they agreed upon peace. They're trying to make sense of it, but Undine Thwaite feels like this is a call to action. She has to respond with her own counter-protest. If she doesn't, the No Name League is going to look pretty weak. John Ripper gives a suggestion, though, that Undine Thwaite do nothing. Just let the police do her bidding for her. And even hours later at night, this rally is still the talking point of pretty much everybody. The Prime Minister gets invited to a fancy dinner with a bunch of lords and higher-ups, and it actually just so happens to be the house that Mr. Pennyworth works in. As the group of powerful men are discussing the Raven Society and how awful they are and how all they want is blood, Mr. Pennyworth comes in because the Prime Minister has received a phone call. And the phone call is from Detective Aziz. And that's because Aziz knows that Curzon's father is also at this dinner party. So when the dinner party's over, he wants to talk to the Prime Minister and Curzon's father alone. When Aziz shows up, the Prime Minister asks, why isn't this situation resolved already? And Aziz goes on to point out that Pennyworth is a trained SAS combat vet. He's not exactly easy to kill. Now, they can get him, but it would take a lot of effort, which is going to cost a lot of money. And Curzon's father says, I get it. I'm going to have to pay. just get it done. I'm not making excuses for my son. He's never been right in the head. But I'll tell you right now, no child of mine is going to be hunted like a wild animal. After all, he has noble blood running through him. The Prime Minister tells him, don't worry about payment. And immediately, Curzon's father knows that he might not have to pay with money, he's going to have to pay with something. And the Prime Minister says, well, your support for me in the House has been most welcome. And I should hate to lose that support. For any reason, under any circumstance. So this deal is set. As long as Curzon is protected and as long as they get Pennyworth, then the Prime Minister will keep this guy's support. The next day is the big day of the rally. But Thomas Wayne wakes up to a feverish knock at his door, and it's Martha Kane. And it looks like Thomas Wayne had a banger of a night. He is completely hungover. She points out that the Raven Society rally is that day and says, what are you guys doing about it? But he says, nothing. Undine Thwaite told us to stay home. And she says, no. Not the No-Name League. I'm talking the CIA. What is the CIA doing about it? I'm guessing you're going to play a waiting game, but I feel like that's a mistake. The situation could deteriorate fast. Thomas, though, once again tries to tell her that he's not CIA, and she definitely doesn't believe it. She goes on to say that the whole CIA thing isn't an issue with her. They can continue to work together. But he says, no, that's a whole other issue. Now, I'm not CIA, but suppose I was. You're not exactly agency material. I mean, let's not forget, last week you went on a 3-day drug spree and escorted my sister to a satanist orgy. And she points out the state of Thomas Wayne. He's been drowning himself in pills and booze, and this guy's sitting in a glass house throwing stones? There's a little bit of a lull in the conversation, and then she asks, come on, what happened with you at Crowley's? You saw the devil, didn't you? It's okay, because I did. I saw him. But Thomas says, no, Martha, I didn't see the devil, and neither did you. You imagined him. Crowley is nothing more than a spooky guy. And Martha kind of looks at him like, yeah, whatever you say. Now, over at the Pennyworth house, he's awoken by a phone call from Aziz telling him where he can find Curzon, saying he's gift wrapped for you. Come alone. So Alfred goes upstairs, grabs his gun, and gets ready to go. And as his father heads to the rally, he heads to take care of Curzon. He goes to the location that Aziz gave him, which is in an abandoned warehouse. And sure enough, there's Curzon, along with Mrs. Pike, blindfolded and handcuffed. First thing Alfie does is take off the blindfold and face Curzon one-on-one. And Curzon starts mocking him over the fact that Alfie doesn't really have anything to say to him. And as Alfie is standing there getting mocked by this nutcase, Alfie yells for Inspector Aziz because he's aware that he just walked into a trap. And sure enough, Inspector Aziz comes out from the shadows, and Alfie has, in fact, walked into a trap. Inspector Aziz has himself 3 other police officers and a sniper. Alfie starts hypothesizing that he could be able to kill Curzon before they could kill him. And that's when he puts the gun at Curzon's head. But Inspector Aziz wants to resolve this peacefully. He doesn't want to have to kill Alfie. Even though Alfie doesn't know it, Inspector Aziz isn't a fan of how all of this went down. He explains that he is sorry, but unfortunately, Curzon's father has a lot of political clout. He starts negotiating with Alfie that if he just flee the country, he can let him go. But Alfie isn't interested in that. He wants Curzon's blood. It gets to the point where Aziz is really close to making the signal to kill Alfie. And that's when Sykes, who wasn't invited to this thing but somehow found out where they were, ends up sneaking behind Aziz and putting a knife to his throat. It forces Aziz to tell his men to stand down, and now Alfie and Sykes can do whatever they want with Curzon. Sykes wants to torture him. Alfie says, no, we're not going to do that. We're not animals. Sykes, however, asks him for just 10 minutes alone and tells him if you're squeamish, turn away. And it seems like she's about to start torturing him, but Alfie's had enough of it. He pulls out a gun, shoots Curzon and Pike in the head, and then says, let's go. As he's leaving, Aziz lets him know that this is going to cause waves. So Alfie says, all right, well then I guess I'll see you soon. But as Alfie is getting rid of the murder weapon and any clothes that have blood on it, most of the country is busy watching the telecast of the Raven Society rally. This includes Martha Kane and Thomas Wayne, John Ripper and Undine Thwaite, and of course the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister has a smugness about him, like, all right, let's see what she has to say. And she gets up there and tells the crowd that they have a battle in front of them. She then goes on to explain her predecessor, Lord Hardwood, and what happened to him. And then she announces to everybody that she is stepping down. And there's an audible gasp in the crowd, but then she shows the reason why and reintroduces Lord Hardwood. And the crowd goes wild. And this includes Mr. Pennyworth. Now, everybody who's watching at home is shocked by this. No one more so than the Prime Minister, who immediately hops on the phone and demands the police officers on horseback get in there and disperse the crowd. Lord Hardwood starts in on his propaganda, but then suddenly it is interrupted by the police, and they're using brutal force. The crowd is running away, but they're getting caught up in it, but then all of a sudden Lord Hardwood screams, "Stop!" He tells the police that this is England. They will respect their ancient rights and stop this violence. And the police stand down. It's a really bad look for the Prime Minister. Hardwood is looked at as a hero. Now, Alfie has no idea about the rally. He has no idea what happened to it. He heads to the bar and meets up with Dave Boy and Baza, and they fill him in on what he missed. But he doesn't care. He only showed up to let them know that Curzon and Pike are taken care of, and then he leaves for home. Right before he enters the house, his mom is tending to his father who was beaten up in the rally, and they both agree that they cannot tell Alfie where his dad was. So when Alfie shows up, he's very concerned for his father, but he says, "Oh, don't worry about me. I knocked into a door." And when they ask where Alfie's been, Alfie doesn't answer the question, just asking his mom for a hug. The next day, the rally is on the front page of the newspaper, and the Prime Minister is called to answer for his actions in front of the Queen. The paper is deeming Hardwood as a national sensation. But the Prime Minister says, well, maybe if we had a water cannon and rubber bullets, and the Queen cannot believe that the Prime Minister is trying to blame her on this one. She tells him that he needs to get rid of the guy in a public setting to make an example of him. But the Prime Minister says, I can't. He's far too high profile now. If we even arrest him, there'll be angry mobs in the streets howling for his liberty. So the Prime Minister and the Queen are stuck between a rock and a hard place. Over with Hardwood, he's celebrating with Francis Gaunt on this victory. But then someone comes in and lets Hardwood know that his guests are arrived. And Francis Gaunt had no idea that he even had guests. Now, he had posed this to Francis Gaunt before. If the Queen isn't willing to play ball, then maybe she needs to be scared by the Duke and Duchess of Windermere returning. Francis didn't think it was a great idea because, once again, this guy is disgraced. But she doesn't put up much of a fight. She puts her whole support behind Hardwood. You can tell, though, that she didn't think he would go through with it, actually bringing them back. So she is very surprised when the Duke and Duchess end up walking into the room. And then finally, over with Alfie. He ends up heading to Esme's grave and letting her know that he took care of the people who ended up killing her. But unfortunately for Alfie, Aziz knew he was going to be there. So when Alfie looks up, he's surrounded by police officers at gunpoint. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought this sucked. Make sure to be nice in the comment section. If you don't see the next video up in the end screen there, I'll get it up in a few days, not to worry. And I have merchandise, so go buy a mug or something. It's never too early to think about Christmas gifts, folks. Once again, thank you for checking out this recap.